Nobody puts a banner over their garage to celebrate their father leaving. Nobody normal anyway. My name is Ray Hollis. I'm 54 years old. I've got a bad knee from 30 years of warehouse floors. And until 9 days ago, I lived in the back bedroom of my son Derek's house on Clover Mill Road in Eastbrook, a quiet brick house suburb on Columbus's east side, the kind of neighborhood where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and wave at you whether they like you or not. I moved in after the divorce, 2 years ago. Sandra and I signed the papers on a Wednesday, and by Friday I had 2 duffel bags and a folding table in Derek's spare room. Wasn't supposed to be permanent. That's what I told myself every single morning while I made coffee and listened to my daughter-in-law Brenna moving around upstairs like she was trying to sand the floor with her heels. 2 years. I paid rent. Not a lot, $600 a month, but I paid it. I fixed Derek's gutters in October, rebuilt his back fence after the windstorm in March, watched their dog Cooper 4 weekends in a row while they went up to Lake Erie. I was not a freeloader. I need you to understand that before we go any further, because what I'm about to describe is going to make you question whether I was living in a house or a trap. Derek called me into the kitchen on a Sunday, June 1st, 6 days before all of this, and sat across from me with his hands folded like he was about to fire an employee. He's 31. He's got his mother's jawline and my stubbornness, which is a combination that has never once worked in anyone's favor. Dad, Brenna and I have been talking. Oh, here we go. And we feel like it's time for you to find your own place. Okay, we need the room. Brenna's sister might be coming. Derek, I said okay. He blinked. I think he'd rehearsed a longer speech. Brenna was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, wearing the expression she reserves for people who've disappointed her, which, near as I can tell, is everyone alive. She's not a bad person. She's just the kind of woman who treats every room like a courtroom and every conversation like a verdict. We'll give you 2 weeks, Derek added. I'll be out in 1. And I meant it. I'm not a man who overstays a welcome once the welcome has been officially revoked. I spent that week at my buddy Gary's place, Gary Hutchins, who I've known since we were both getting sunburned at Buckeye football games in 1993, sleeping on his pull-out couch and calling apartment listings every morning. I found a 1-bedroom on Fenwick Avenue, 2 miles from Eastbrook, move-in date of June 14th. All I needed was to go back to Clover Mill Road on Saturday the 7th and grab my last box. Tools mostly, an old radio, my father's pocket watch. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I pulled up to the house at 2:14 in the afternoon and sat in my truck for exactly 4 seconds before I understood that this was not a normal Saturday. There were cars lining both sides of Clover Mill Road. I recognized Gary's Silverado. Wait, Gary knew about this? And Derek's boss's Audi, and no fewer than 3 other vehicles belonging to people from Derek's office. Music was coming from the backyard. A folding table with a red cooler sat on the driveway, and stretched across the front of the garage in black block letters on a white vinyl banner, printed neat as a highway sign. Goodbye, freeloader. Don't come back. I sat in that truck for a long time. Don't react. Don't give them the reaction. I got out. I walked to the front door. A guy named Phil, Derek's work friend, the one who laughs too loud at everything, opened it before I could knock, took one look at me, and his smile went sideways. Ray, hey man, we didn't think you'd actually... Just here for my box, Phil. The party was in full swing, backyard, side yard, kitchen spilling onto the patio. Maybe 30 people, some of whom I recognized, some I'd never seen. Brenna was holding a glass of white wine and talking to her friend Sasha, and when she saw me walk through the back door, she went very still for a moment, the way a person goes still when something unexpected but not entirely unwelcome has happened. Derek was standing at the grill. He saw me, his jaw moved, but nothing came out. Good. I walked through that party like a ghost. People stepped aside. Nobody said anything useful. I went to the spare room, picked up my box, not heavy, maybe 20 pounds, and I walked back out through the kitchen, through the side yard, and around to the front of the house. And I stopped in front of that banner. I put the box down, I took out my phone, and I photographed it. Careful, wide angle, the whole thing. The banner, the house number, the cars in the driveway, the balloon somebody had tied to the mailbox. I took 7 photos from 4 different angles. Then I took a video, slow pan left to right, catching the banner and the party guests visible through the side gate. Derek had come around the front of the house. Dad, It's just a joke. Yep. Come on. Brenna thought it would be Derek. I picked up my box. Have a great party. I put my box in the truck. I drove to Gary's place, and on the way, I made one phone call. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. I called my old accountant, Pete Grady. Pete, you still have the paperwork from 2021? A pause? The Hollis Caldwell filing. Yeah, Ray, it's all here. Good. Don't shred anything. I didn't explain. Pete didn't ask. That's why I've used him for 22 years. Here's what you need to know about Derek's business. Caldwell Home Services, a residential HVAC and plumbing company operating out of a small office on Broad Street in Columbus. Derek started it in 2020, right when everyone was either losing their mind or starting a business. He had the idea, he had the hustle, and he had apparently no concept of where the startup money actually came from. I'll remind you, it came from me, not a loan. A loan would have been simpler. When Derek came to me in the spring of 2021, still 3 months from launch, still short on operating capital, I sat across from him at the same kitchen table where he would eventually tell me I had 2 weeks to leave, and I gave him $40,000. And because Gary, who is not just my buddy but also a retired paralegal, told me I should protect myself, we signed an agreement, not complicated, 12 lines on a piece of paper notarized at a UPS store on Morse Road. Ray Thomas Hollis, 40% silent ownership stake, Caldwell Home Services LLC. Derek signed it. I signed it. He got his $40,000 and I got a piece of paper I folded up and forgot about. Because the business was my son's dream, and I never planned to use it. I didn't know it yet, but Brenna had recently convinced Derek to use the family property I co-owned with him, a small lot in Gahanna we'd inherited together from my mother, as collateral on a new business expansion loan. Without telling me, without asking. My name was on that land, my name was on that company, and somebody had just put my name on a banner that called me a freeloader in front of 30 witnesses. Gary was sitting on his porch when I pulled up. He looked at me, looked at the box in my truck, looked at my face. Bad? There was a banner. He was quiet for a second. A banner. Vinyl. Professional print. Probably $40 at FedEx office. Gary let out a slow breath. What are you gonna do? I set the box down on his porch steps and looked out at the street. Eastbrook was 2 miles east. Derek was probably back at the grill by now, laughing with Phil, explaining that the old man had handled it pretty well, all things considered. Nothing yet, I said. I'm gonna let him enjoy his Saturday. He had 14 days before his expansion loan review meeting with his bank. I knew that because the loan documents, the ones using the Gahanna property I co-owned, had been mailed to my forwarding address by accident. I'd opened them on Wednesday. I hadn't said a word. Welcome to Sweet Family Revenge. Get comfortable. This one is worth the full ride. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're watching from, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Revenge is patient. That's the part nobody tells you. The movies make it look like fury, broken glass, dramatic confrontations in parking lots. What it actually looks like is a 61-year-old accountant named Pete Grady pulling a manila folder out of a filing cabinet and putting on his reading glasses. I spent Sunday the 8th at Gary's kitchen table with coffee and a yellow legal pad. Gary sat across from me pretending to read the newspaper. Every few minutes he'd look up, clock my expression, and go back to the sports section without saying anything. That's the kind of friend Gary is. The man has never once told me to calm down, and I've known him for 31 years. I wasn't calm, but I was quiet. There's a difference. By Monday morning, I had a list. 3 items. Clean handwriting. No scratching out. 1. Confirm the ownership stake with Pete. 2. Pull the Gahanna property deed and verify my name is still on it. 3. Find out exactly when Derek's loan review meeting was scheduled. Item 3 was the easiest. The loan documents that had landed in my mailbox, forwarded from Clover Mill Road to Gary's address, because I'd set up mail forwarding the day Derek told me to leave, included a cover letter from a loan officer named Tom Baxter at First Heartland Bank on High Street. The meeting date was stamped right there on page 2. Friday, June 20th, 10 a.m. 13 days away. I drove to Pete's office on Monday afternoon. Pete Grady operates out of a converted row house in Clintonville, 8 blocks from where I grew up. He's been my accountant since I was 32 years old, and the man has never once lost a document. His filing system looks like organized chaos, but he can find anything in under 4 minutes. I've tested this. He had the 2021 agreement on his desk before I finished explaining why I was there. 40% Ray. He tapped the signature line. Derek's signature, your signature, notarized. It's solid. Solid how? Solid like it would hold up in any Ohio civil court. You're a minority stakeholder, but you're a real one. You have standing. Derek can't take on major debt obligations that affect the business without at minimum notifying you. I let that sit for a second. And the Gahana property? Pete pulled up something on his computer. Your name's still on the deed. I checked this morning when you called. It's a co-ownership. You and Derek. Equal shares inherited from your mother's estate in 2019. And he used it as collateral. Pete looked at me over his glasses. He's got the face of a man who has seen a lot of financial messes and is always mildly disappointed, but never surprised. Without your written consent, that's a problem. For the loan, yes, but more importantly, for Derek. I picked up the manila folder, the ownership agreement, the loan documents, the deed. All of it, 3 neat piles. Pete, I need you to put all of this in order for me. Clean copies, the kind you'd bring to a bank. He nodded slowly. Ray, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to attend a meeting. The 12 days between the banner and the bank meeting were the strangest of my adult life. Not because anything dramatic happened. Nothing did. I woke up at Gary's place every morning, drank my coffee, called a few apartment listings, watched the evening news. I went to see my daughter Joni twice. She lives in Hilliard, west side of Columbus, and she'd heard about the barbecue from one of Brenna's cousins who apparently couldn't resist texting her about the banner. Dad. Joni's voice on the phone was the kind of quiet that means she is actually furious. Tell me the banner thing isn't true. It's true. A long pause. I'm gonna call Derek. Don't. Dad. Joni. I need you to not call Derek. Not yet. Can you do that for me? Another pause. What are you doing? Waiting. She knows me well enough to know that when I say waiting, I mean I'm doing something that is going to make a lot of noise, and I'd prefer nobody warn the neighbors. I saw Derek once during those 2 weeks, ran into him at the Kroger on Livingston Avenue, Wednesday the 11th late afternoon. He was in the cereal aisle. He saw me first, and for a split second I watched his whole face try to decide whether to look guilty or indifferent. He landed on something in between, which meant he looked like a man having a very minor stroke in the Cheerios section. Dad, hey, Derek. You find a place? I did. Good. That's good. He shifted his basket. Look, the banner thing, Brenna thought it would be funny. I know it probably. Derek, are you out of half and half? He blinked. What? Half and half. You've been standing in front of the dairy section for 20 seconds. He looked at the refrigerator case behind him. Oh, yeah. Don't forget it. And I walked away. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing you're hurt, and don't give them any warning that you know what you know. I drove home, Gary's home, and I sat on the porch and thought about my father's pocket watch, which was still in that box of tools, which was still in Gary's garage. My father worked at the International Harvester plant in Springfield for 28 years. He never once complained about a single one of those days. He said working for something gave a man shape. Said a man without work was just a man-shaped hole in the air. I'd worked since I was 16. Warehouse, forklift, 10 years in logistics management, another 12 running operations for a mid-sized supply company before the buyout that ended that particular chapter. I was not, by any stretch, a freeloader. That banner was going to cost somebody. Friday, June 13th, a week before the meeting, I drove to FedEx office on Morse Road, the same one where I'm fairly certain Brenna had the banner printed. I asked the woman at the counter, her name tag said Nikki, whether they could print a banner for me. Same dimensions as a standard garage banner. White vinyl. Black text. Sure, hun. What do you want it to say? I handed her a folded piece of paper. She opened it, read it, and her eyebrows went up approximately 1 inch. Okay, she said. You want it ready by when? Thursday the 19th. No problem. I paid cash, $22.50. The best $22 I ever spent. On the evening of Thursday the 19th, I picked up my banner from Nikki at FedEx office. I stopped by Pete's office and picked up the document packet he'd prepared. Clean copies, tabbed, in a brown leather portfolio I'd bought at Staples for $11. I went back to Gary's place, and Gary and I sat on the porch with 2 beers, and I told him the full plan for the first time. When I finished, Gary was quiet for a long moment. He took a sip of his beer. He looked out at the street. Ray, you're sure about this? I've been sure since the moment I saw the banner. You know Derek's going to be humiliated. He humiliated me in front of 30 people and put it on vinyl. Gary thought about this. Fair point. Another sip. You want company tomorrow? No. I need you to do one thing for me, though. Name it. Call Brenna's cell at 9:55 tomorrow morning. And say what? Nothing complicated. Just tell her she left her car lights on. Gary looked at me. A slow smile started at the corner of his mouth. You want her distracted. I want her phone in her hand and her attention somewhere else for about 60 seconds. And what happens in those 60 seconds? I picked up my beer. Derek opens a portfolio. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you for real. The thing about a well-dressed man carrying a leather portfolio is that nobody questions him. Nobody stops him in a lobby and asks what he's doing there. He just walks, like he belongs, like the building was expecting him. I wore the gray suit I'd bought for my mother's funeral in 2019. Still fit. Sandra always said that suit made me look like a man who made decisions. I was about to make one. First Heartland Bank sits in a renovated 3-story building on High Street in downtown Columbus, between a coffee shop and a parking garage. The lobby has marble floors, potted plants that might be real, and a receptionist at a curved desk who looked up when I came in. Ray Hollis, I'm here for the 10 a.m. meeting. Tom Baxter's loan review. I don't see you on the... I'm a stakeholder in the business under review. 40% ownership. On file. I have documentation. I said it like I was describing the weather. She picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, Tom Baxter himself came through a glass door. Mid-50s, tie too tight. The expression of a man who liked things to be orderly and could already sense that today was not going to be orderly. Mr. Hollis? Tom. Thanks for seeing me. We shook hands. Firm. Dry. Don't let them see anything. I have to say we weren't expecting. I understand. I can document my ownership position right now if that helps move things along. He looked at the portfolio in my hand. He looked at me. Let's go upstairs. The conference room on the 2nd floor was glass-walled. Long table, 6 chairs. Derek was already seated when I walked in, and the moment, that single moment when he looked up from his phone and registered my face, is something I will carry to my grave. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise, exactly. It was the specific expression of a man who has just understood that a thing he believed was finished is not in fact finished. Like finding out the house you sold still has your name on it. Brenna wasn't there. 60 seconds. Also at the table, a woman named Sandra Price from the bank's commercial lending division, and a man I didn't recognize who turned out to be Derek's business partner, a quiet guy named Todd who shook my hand with zero idea what was happening and looked like he wanted to stay that way. Tom Baxter cleared his throat. Mr. Hollis Ray, perhaps you can explain your interest in today's review. I opened the portfolio. I laid the ownership agreement on the table, face up, where everyone could see it. I hold a 40% silent stake in Caldwell Home Services, established in 2021. The expansion loan currently under review would leverage the Gahanna property as collateral, a property I co-own with Derek. My consent was not obtained before this application was filed. I slid a copy towards Sandra Price. You'll find the deed attached. Tab 2. Derek was looking at the ownership agreement like it was a weather forecast for a hurricane that was currently happening. Dad, tab 3, I continued, is a letter from my attorney confirming that any lien placed on the Gahanna property without my written authorization is contestable and would place the loan in a problematic legal position. I didn't have an attorney. I had Pete Grady, who had a nephew named Jeff who had been practicing real estate law in Dublin, Ohio for 6 years. and who had written that letter in 40 minutes on Wednesday afternoon for a flat fee of $300. Every word was accurate, every word was legal. None of it was a bluff. Sandra Price was reading, Tom Baxter was reading. Todd was looking at the ceiling in the specific way of a man who has decided he is not involved in whatever this is. Derek looked at me. You came here to blow up my loan. And here's the moment. Right here. This is the one I've been waiting for. No. I reached into the portfolio one more time. I came here to give you this. I placed the last document on the table. A single page. Clean type. Short. A buyout offer. $40,000, exactly what I'd put in for my 40% stake. Fair, clean, nothing punitive. Derek stared at it. You want your money back. What I want, I said, is for you to understand what was actually on the line when you hung that banner. This is about the banner. This is about 2 years of rent paid on time, a fence rebuilt, gutters cleared in October, 4 weekends of dog sitting, and a $40,000 investment I never once asked you about. I closed the portfolio. The banner was just the day I decided to remember all of it at once. Nobody said anything for a moment. Tom Baxter looked like he was calculating exactly how long until this became somebody else's problem. Then Derek, and I'll give him this, because he is still my son, and somewhere inside that 31-year-old chest is the 8-year-old who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way home from Little League. Derek looked down at the table. What do you actually want, Dad? Good question. Finally, sign the buyout. $40,000 back into my account. And one other thing. What? A photograph, 8 by 10, printed at Walgreens. The banner. The balloons on the mailbox. The house number clear as a street sign. 30 guests visible through the side gate, laughing, red cups in hand. A written apology. To me, from you and Brenna both, handwritten and delivered personally to every person who was at that party. I tapped the photo. You have their names. You invited them. And if I do that, I slid one more paper across the table. A transfer agreement. 40% of Caldwell Home Services transferred back to Derek Caldwell as a gift, contingent on the buyout and the apology. Then the stake is yours again. Clean. No conditions. Todd, who had been studying the ceiling for 4 minutes, looked back at the table. His whole face changed. Derek, Todd said quietly, take the deal. The buyout hit my account on Monday the 23rd, $40,000. The apology letters took longer. Brenna, to her credit, wrote hers first, and it was 4 paragraphs. I've read it a few times. It's genuine enough. Derek's was shorter, but he looked me in the eye when he handed it over at Joni's house, which is where we'd agreed to do the exchange. Joni made coffee. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The ownership stake transferred back to Derek on June 30th. Caldwell Home Services is his again. Free and clear. The expansion loan was reprocessed with the Gahana property properly removed from the collateral. Tom Baxter's office handled that part quietly and quickly, which told me they were relieved not to have a legal dispute attached to their paperwork. I moved into my apartment on Fenwick Avenue on June 14th, 1 week before the meeting. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, south-facing windows that get sun all afternoon. I set up my coffee maker, my radio, and my father's pocket watch on the windowsill. I do not have a banner over my door. I don't need one. Gary came by the first Saturday. We sat on my little balcony with 2 beers and watched Fenwick Avenue do absolutely nothing of note, which was exactly right. So that's it? Gary said, It's done? It's done. And you and Derek? I thought about that. We're not done. We're just reset, starting somewhere new. You think he learned something? I think he learned that I kept a piece of paper from 2021 in Pete Grady's filing cabinet. I took a sip of my beer. The rest, he'll figure out on his own. Gary was quiet for a minute. Then, the banner at FedEx office. The one you had printed. Yeah, you never used it. Nope. What did it say? I smiled. First real smile in 3 weeks. It said, 40%. See you at the bank. Gary started laughing. Deep, chest out. Can't stop himself laughing. The kind I hadn't heard since before any of this started. It felt like something starting to go right. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.